Yesterday, almost 300 people died when a Malaysian airliner was shot down in Ukraine. Now, early on, there were questions about whether or not it had been intentionally shot down, accidentally shot down, or had simply crashed. A lot of evidence came in. We're pretty sure of what happened now. But one piece of evidence came from Ukraine's intelligence service, which intercepted a telephone conversation from alleged separatists in that area. We've got a couple of different sections for you. Now, in this first one, you're going to hear that they have shot down an airplane, but they don't have many details about it.
Только что сбили самолет, группа минера, Заинакиева упал.
Летчики.
Поехали искать и фотографировать сбитый самолет. Дымится.
Сколько минут назад?
30 минут назад где-то.
Here you'll hear them as they begin to realize what actually happened.
Да, майор.
Значит, это Чернухинские сбили самолет.
Кто сбил?
С Чернухинского блокпоста. Казаки, что на Чернухина стоят.
Да, майор.
Значит, самолет рассыпался в воздухе в районе шахты Петропавловской. Первый 200-й. Нашли первого 200-го. Была женщина. Да, гражданский. Да, Саш.
Ну что у вас там?
Короче, стопудово гражданский борт.
Понятно. А этот, как и, народу много там?
Это пиздец. В обломки прямо во дворы падали тут. Вот так вот.
Борт какой?
Да я еще пока не разобрался, потому что я не был возле основной части. Я только вот смотрю там, где начали первые тела падать. Там остатки внутренних кронштейнов, кресла, тела.
Понятно.
Вот так.
Вооружение есть что-нибудь?
Вообще ничего. Гражданские вещи, медицинские ошметки, там полотенце такое, туалетная бумага.
Документы есть?
Да. Индонезийского студента есть из университета Томпсона,
So they've realized what actually happened. Not a ton of remorse in the audio that we see there, but just sort of a casual assessment of what they've found in the wreckage.
There was a fuck earlier.
The fuck seemed to me to be that things were raining down close by or something like that. I thought that's the way I interpreted that. I could be wrong.
I thought it was...
The varied interpretations of scum and fuck on this show today have been unbelievable. But yeah, I thought fuck was like a realization that
we've made
it was a huge mistake here.
Yeah, I got a sense, obviously this is translation and everything, but that the guy looking at the bodies was like, oh no, like we've done something terribly wrong.
He's like, no, they're no.
Yeah. And everybody sees it differently, of course. But in terms of evidence, it's impossible to know. I mean, I've literally never seen as much propaganda about anything as I have about Ukraine and Russia, right? And it's so hard to know what to trust. So the Ukrainians say they have this conversation. If they have conversations between all the Russian rebels, why don't they go get them? Like, I'm always confused by that. It seems like whenever we need a conversation, it's okay. Somebody's recording every single phone call that's ever happened.
What do you mean, why don't they go get them? I mean,
like the Ukrainian military, they're against these guys. They're apparently recording all their conversations. Don't you know where they are? Why don't you go get them?
Well, I mean, I think they do know where they are, but they're in a war. They're holding that area. It would require a major offensive to go get them. I think they know where they are. Yeah, I think they always know where they are.
They're occupying several cities right now. It's just difficult. They're relatively well
How do they not
armed.
know all their conversations are being recorded? I mean, at this point, if I was anybody that was involved in the military anywhere in the world, I would assume my conversations are recorded.
There's a level of sophistication too, I think, that you're dealing with here of knowing those sorts of things. So I mean, you can make assumptions based on the context that you know, but who knows? These rebel fighters in this oblast, which is like it's a region that's away. I mean, even in Ukraine, away from the centers of Ukraine, that there's a level of sophistication they don't have. So they don't think everything's being taped or listened to. Or,
So do I think the Russians did it or the pro-Russian forces did it? Yes. I think that yesterday we presented a ton of evidence. There's even more evidence today. And basically the Russians are not denying it, right? They're saying, oh, well, they started the conflict in the first place, and so it's ultimately their fault. That's
we do actually have a quote from the Russian foreign minister saying, regarding those claims from Kiev that we allegedly did it ourselves, I have not heard a truthful statement from Kiev for months.
We did, but that's did it ourselves, right? That's
no.
That is a good point.
That says we did it.
That says we did it. That's
okay, because it's saying
or
our side did it.
Our loyalists did it.
Okay, so he makes an important clarification about ourselves not doing it, right? So but he doesn't say pro. And he didn't even deny it in that statement.
that's a
he
very
just said,
telling
"Oh,
statement.
I have generally not heard any truthful statements from them."
Yeah, no, it's
right. They did it.
Also, like you know, you've been reading about authenticating that tape that we just played, and that will have to go on.
It does seem a bit tight, a bit.
Well, I mean, I'm
know,
sure it's been edited.
convenient.
It does seem convenient. All
That's
that
what I'm
says.
saying.
But the flip side is that would require some pretty skillful acting.
Yeah,
like
but
they
also
even the
any tape that was authentic would
good.
seem convenient. I mean,
Right.
you know, that's the thing. If
But
it
I mean,
was real, it would-
you know, I mean, from just the straight test of how they wrote that translation, that sounds like a conversation that two guys had, not the conversation that they put together later of what would their conversation have sounded like. Oh, let's count where the first party started falling. It's in the years. They're like,
I don't know. I'm not sure about that because the way he's like, are they all civilians? And he's like, yes, they are all civilians. Do you have?
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have documents? Oh, yes. Here is an Indonesian passport or whatever it was, right?
There are passports all over the place.
So look, I think the pro-Russian forces did it. I think there's overwhelming evidence to that effect, and it's incredibly possible that this is exactly the tape of them talking about it. I'm just saying, note of caution here. There's been tremendous propaganda on both sides. It's also possible that this is not, it's not authenticated right now, and it's possible that it's not 100% real, which wouldn't necessarily change the equation. Because to me, the non-denial of the Russians is the most important piece of information.
That did sound, to me, that sounded authentic. Given what we found.
Well, a final bit of the audio. Many people coming out of this situation are
Let me
questioning.
just, how goofy, if the Ukrainians wrote it and got it out there, it would be pretty goofy, the translation. It would be pretty goofy.
Okay, and by the way, the reaction of the Ukrainians is also relevant here. The Ukrainian government saying it's a horrible atrocity that people should be severely punished for under international law. If their side did it, I'm not sure they would have been quite that strident in how everybody responsible should go to jail.
So I think the system that fired it down, we think, is this Buk anti-aircraft system. And the separatists were saying that they don't have that system except the end of last month. They were like, hey, look, we got this cool new Buk system.
Yeah, and also, you know that the Russians, even whether, of course, they don't have it, they didn't come up with it, the Russians have supplied it to them. And the reason that there seems to be some sort of Russian, to me, compliance, or not compliance, is the fact that the separatist complicity, the non-compliance, I think the separatists did it too. And I think it's because the Russians, for all their bluster, they have the capability of seeing what kind of an airplane this is. They have
I see. That's an interesting point.
You know, and the separatists wouldn't have that equipment. So the Russians would be less likely, even though there's some other history, but they'd be less likely to shoot down a passenger plane, even more.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So back to this final audio piece. Many people were wondering why a civilian airliner was flying over what seems objectively to be a war zone. They discussed that in the audio tape as well.
По самолету, сбитым в районе Снежного Тореза.
Ну,
Это оказался пассажирский. Упал в районе Грабова. Там море трупов, женщины, дети. Сейчас казаки там смотрят это все дело. По телевизору передают вроде бы как этот Ан-26 украинский транспортник. Но, говорят, написано на нем малазийские авиалинии. И что он делал на территории Украины?
ну, значит, завозили шпионов у них нахуй. Понял? Не
Так
хули так,
точно.
блядь, сейчас война идет, блядь.
Понял.
Been any guy who looked more Russian than the guy up top in that picture?
He was in a Bond movie.
They're talking about the Cossacks.
I just wrote to Ben a note during that. There are still Cossacks?
Yeah,
It's a group.
Well, has anyone ever looked more like a Cossack than the guy at the bottom of that picture?
also, like that would require. Here's where I think I definitely have this edge over you guys. If you're telling me the Ukrainian military manufactured that conversation and included the part about what are they doing flying over here? It's a war zone. Like they wouldn't include that. That's how they get out of it. They might have been trying to make it seem intentional. What that conversation relays to me is they did it, and they were like, "God damn it! It was a passenger plane. We didn't want to shoot down a passenger."
And apparently, as many, it's not totally confirmed, but as many as 108 conference participants traveling to an AIDS conference died en route. They have only confirmed 7, but that is an absolutely massive number, a large percentage of the total population of the plane. We have a quote from someone involved in this research saying, "To lose people so heavily engaged in efforts to fight HIV is an incalculable loss in every sense. The International AIDS Conference is already a time of reflection for those we've lost to HIV/AIDS. Losing colleagues engaged in the fight against HIV who were in transit to the event will only make it more somber. Another person involved in that research saying, we are hardly sort of unfamiliar with losing people in this fight. And so it's just another layer of tragedy on top of a bad situation.
I mean, I think that it has to be talked about because I can't stop thinking about it. Both the bad luck and the weird coincidence of it being a Malaysian plane, you know, a Malaysian Airlines plane is just incredible. And they were already apparently decimated, that carrier and that country, because of the missing Flight 370.
Part of the reason that these planes don't go around is because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And some airlines have, Qantas 4 months ago, rerouted all their flights that had to go over that.
Malaysian Airlines said, they came out with a statement saying they had not been advised not to fly in that area. I don't know that that is true or not, but that's one of the
Pick up a
statements they
fucking
made.
newspaper.
But the original flight plan of this flight didn't take them over that airspace specifically, but they moved around weather, which pilots often do, and they have the autonomy
and
to
often
do
they have
it.
no choice to.
Yeah.
But also some airlines, because it costs more fuel, have just decided we'll fly over this because the risk is so incredibly low and it's that much cheaper. But some airlines are going out of their way to avoid it.
Well, they are
and now
now,
they are
that's
now.
for
Now they
sure.
all are.
And the FAA was so proud to say that they've advised all planes in America, all U.S. carriers, not to fly over that airspace. There was not one scheduled U.S. flight that ever flew over that airspace at all. We have none that take that route, apparently. So even though the FAA said it, they said, well, we tell our planes not to do it. Well, they do it because they don't fly there anyway.